So today, Flavio is with us. The title of his talk is Open Science 2.0 within the framework of open and reproducible research training, which is FORRT. And he's going to be talking about democratizing education on open science while focusing on DEI efforts in grassroots communities. And so with that, I'd like to turn it over to you, Flavia, and you can share your screen. And we are just so excited to have you here and appreciative of you being here. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for this amazing introduction. I think it was the most thorough and well-researched introduction. Thank you, Cynthia. I'll start by sharing my screen and presentation, and you let me know if everything shows up right and you can hear me all right and everything is good. And if so, I'll get started. What do you think?
It looks good, Flavio. We can see slides and we can hear you perfectly.
Thank you, Jenny. All right. So first and foremost, I'm here on behalf of the FORRT community. The majority of work isn't made by me. It is about our community, and as you will see. So I'm delighted to be here and have this opportunity to introduce FORRT. I also would like to thank Cynthia Hall and the Earth Science Information Partners for inviting me to be a speaker on their Open Science webinar series. I will be presenting a talk entitled, well, it is a mix and match with democratizing open science and introducing FORRT. And I hope I can do justice to this amazing community and convey the insights that educators devoted to integrating open scholarship into their teaching and mentoring, and also as a result of their effort in co-creating FORRT together, which is why I'm here. So open science initiatives, in our view, have turned a blind eye to education, losing on opportunities to address the perverse academic incentives, but also opportunities to reevaluate assessment that nowadays, and especially in the past, eroded research quality. So this talk is focused on curricular reform, development of new methods of education, and addressing questions that are related to how do we equitably distribute knowledge and learning opportunities across different groups of society. Another question that we're going to touch upon is how can we build society, open science communities that reflect the values of accessibility, diversity, inclusion, and accessibility with low resources and lack of support oftentimes. And lastly, how do we ensure that different groups and different approaches to epistemologies are respected in our open science social movement and initiatives? So what is FORRT, right? Before I tell you all our education initiatives, I'll tell you a little bit about what we are collectively. So we just turned last weekend 5, or still very early, a child. And we are an organization that started in 2018 at a hackathon for the Society of the Improvement of Psychological Science. And I'm a political scientist myself. It was my first psychological conference there. And we got together with very cool folks and we founded FORRT. And in the last 5 years, this organization has increased a lot, counting today with more than 850 people and across academic fields and disciplines. We do have some folks in mathematics and physics and STEM, but the majority of our folks is on social sciences. We do cater for life sciences as well. We are sort of an umbrella organization, but those are mostly the fields that are there. So it's just a matter of who clicks on the link that I'll send in a little bit about, you know, who wants to join our Slacking in many ways and support our initiative. Importantly, FORRT has done all its work that I'm going to present as a volunteer-based work, which means that to date, all FORRT projects have been completed without funding. Therefore, any funds received, and I'll distribute in just a minute the GoFund as well, would go towards driving impact and ensuring sustainability of our community. We partner up with major open science organizations like the Center for Open Science, Liberate Science, Big Team Science, and other organizations. And our work was thankfully featured at NASA TOPS, UNESCO, the UK Parliament, UK Rio, and we just got Dorothy Bishop Award. When it comes to goals, our main goal is to develop, together with educators, a path towards the incremental step-by-step adoption of what we call principal education. But essentially that means that we are integrating open science tenets and principles into the way that we are teaching our subject matters, whether that is on physics or political science, my field, or psychology or biology, implementing better, research practices and breaking that glass ceiling of what science is essentially our first goal. We also aim to generate a conversation about the ethics and the social impact of higher education that is focused on epistemic uncertainty, on epistemic plurality and humility, as a way to achieve research integrity and research credibility. FORRT also tries to consider open science as inclusive science. So we like to say that we are not on open science, we are on open scholarship, and we would like to be more inclusive. And lastly, FORRT tries to promote discussions about the different perceived incentives, but also importance of different academic activities. So think of how, for example, publishing an article and doing research is far overvalued to the detriment of giving good education or devoting time for good education, as well as advocate for, social justice related topics, how that is devalued in relation to publishing a paper on a given topic. So those are our essential goals. You're probably familiar with, why we're here. So I'm going to skip that, but I'm just going to say that in social sciences, led by the Center for Open Science, the major idea is that we can achieve scientific utopia if we do three things: open scientific communication, so open access sort of things, restructure the incentives, academic incentives to promote truth over publishability, essentially stop with that thing that, oh, this super counterintuitive finding, it's, stop with that. And the third is to essentially crowdsource science towards big team science collaboration, so we can accumulate knowledge easier and also check, the generalizability of our findings, right? Those are the founding principles of scientific utopia. And we think that there is a fourth cluster, right, a fourth pillar here, which is integrating open scholarship into higher education, because what we want is to train our students in higher education, but anywhere in the educational pipeline, to be better consumers of science, right? So it's not like we need to train everybody to be scientists, but we want better consumers of science. And this is particularly important in a world with so much conspiracy theories, a lot of funds towards generating anti-science attitudes, and we live in this world. So it's important that folks are able to separate the wheat from the chaff, right? So we funded FORRT for all of these reasons, and now I'll talk about how we accomplish our projects, and then I'll present our educational projects. So you're familiar with this, so I'll go fast on this. But essentially, every education initiative that we try to create is designed to be easy to incorporate, to be adaptable, to be fair, I'm sure you know, findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable, and dynamic. Dynamic is kind of new, is in the sense that a lot of our initiatives, we start the initiative and we keep having phases on it. So we are on the second phase of the glossary initiative that I'll tell you about. We're in the second phase of the summaries. We're in the fourth phase of the clusters. It's essentially, we keep updating and improving based on feedback from the community. All right, great. So we use a team science approach to meta science. We're a community science, of course. We're open to anyone. And we are very strict about our code of conduct, of course, open practices and modularity of our trainings. And to do so, to achieve these goals, we're very clear on our instruction and goals. We try to do everything with the lowest barrier as possible whenever we're producing academic and teaching and mentoring resources. So we lower the barrier of entry. That means that we mostly work on Google products because they are free. They are the least barrier, and I recommend proxy in countries where, like Iran and China, that does not let you use these tools, and that works for us. We work closely with folks from these countries. You know, very light on leadership, very strong on communication, and etc. So that's how. Now, what do we do, right? So I will first, yeah. So there is a chat here. I'll just check if this is a. Oh yeah, Cynthia kindly sharing a link. I'll share a link here as well. Several links from our organization. So let me just check here. Yeah. All right. So our first initiative that I'll present to you is the FORRT's glossary, and you can see the URL here. And we also try to attach a scientific paper or a perspectives paper to our educational resource, which we hope helps in two ways. First, the outcome is that people get recognition for their work on the educational initiative, which before FORRT there wasn't, right? The other thing is that we are able to also have a feedback loop between people who are reading our article and learning about the resource, and vice versa, right? People arrive at FORRT either by reading articles or learning about the resource, essentially, right? So we got together with 112 people, and we defined over 250 open science terms, essentially they are composed of a brief definition. They are related terms, so there's a network of terms that people can loop in the website. The references, it's also at the bottom of the page, like all the full references, and who worked on that term in particular. And we went through a period of internal as well as public review. So we went on Twitter and we're like, oh, this is the definition of cumulative science. How can we improve it? What are we missing, etc., right? So it got published in Nature Human Behavior, which is a good journal, and it's used a lot. It receives about 40 visits a day, the glossary. Now, the glossary initiative is a dynamic project. What does that mean? It means that, you know, we are expanding and adding 350 terms to a grand total of 700, and we are translating into 10 different languages. So if you want to help out, go to our Get Involved page, and I'll let you know. We will let you know how you can contribute, right? And if you really think about, you know, what's the role of phases, etc., you can think that scholars are always updating their knowledge and vocabulary. So we found that there wasn't an access point for those wishing to learn about open scholarship. Like, what are the terms? What do they mean, right? And that's why we provided this. The next thing, the next initiative is called FORRT Clusters, and it's essentially a summary right, of the literature on open science, and it's community driven. And, for the same reasons there wasn't an access point to open science, open scholarship. There wasn't an organization, a systematic and updatable organization of open science literature, and especially one that can cross different fields and be often dynamic because of the debates, right? So it's a tall task for most learners of open science to like just be aware of all the debates across different fields. And as an organization, however, we can sort of try to fulfill that role, right? And this is the result of the FORRT clusters. And for example, this is what it looks on the website. There's essentially a description of the cluster, and on each of these tabs, there are resources that we consider to be very, very fundamental to understand the issues. We are now currently reforming the 4th iteration of these clusters, and we're going big. Now we have 7 clusters, and we're going to go to 11 clusters. So we are partnering up, for example, with Quala Lab, which is a qualitative open science group, and we're going to have a cluster on how qualitative researchers approach open science, and hopefully the quantitative researchers can also learn from that, because it's very different and very rich in terms of insight. We're also partnering up with organizations on research integrity, which is a different field of open science, but we are doing most of the same. And we will also have an entire cluster on research integrity, for example. So I'll jump next to the lesson plans, our next FORRT initiative. So for the same reasons as before, essentially, despite the growing awareness of the benefits of training, mostly faculty in open science, there wasn't a systematic incorporation of open science in education for both trainers or staff, but also learners course. So there was a lack of pedagogical resources. So we drew on the expertise of our community to draw up 9 full, complete 1 hour to 2 hours lesson plans, as well as 60 class smaller activities, everything from 25 to 20 minutes activities on this topic. And we categorized them, and we published an article, and you can find every material on this URL here, right? Things on interpreting effect sizes, register reports, dodgy papers, and also on the more social justice aspect of it all, like open science, diversity and inclusion, etc. So we try always to integrate social justice, diversity, equity, and inclusion aspects to open science, because we believe that this social movement is you cannot uncouple these things. All right. We also have an initiative called FORRT Summaries, in which we provide summaries of open scholarship. We are preparing this manuscript, so it hasn't been published. And now we prepared over 200 summaries. It is on the website. We're not saying don't read don't read the actual articles. It's just whenever you want to learn a topic and you need it to do soon, or you just want to have a broader knowledge, you can perhaps use, the many takeaways that you can have from a summary. But of course, do read the paper. And now we are also implementing a peer review process for the summaries that have been produced. And now they are being reviewed by at least 2 members of our community. So this is what it looks like. So this is a famous 2013 article by Chris. These are the main takeaways. All the summaries are here, and we make a difference between open and reproducible science and diversity, equity, and inclusion, but always making them together, right? To really pinpoint how one thing depends on the other. The next initiative that I'll talk to you about is what we call impacts on students. So we kind of was wondering, especially in conversations with people trying to integrate their into their department, how do I integrate open scholarship into my department? And when they tried to do that, the major answer that they received was like, do you even know that this is good? What is the literature saying that we must do that? And etc. So we question ourselves, right? What does it happen, right? And then we wrote a paper on the impact of teaching open science to your students, as far as the evidence is available. So we used, again, a team science approach with 75 collaborators worldwide. We review and synthesize evidence, investigating that impact on at least 3 different prongs. So scientific literacy, so knowledge, skills, competencies, attitudes related to scientific culture and doing science. So that's some of the one of the clusters in which we review evidence. The other is student engagement. So think about enjoyment of learning, student motivation, desirability of future research behavior, concentration, etc. So that's all under the second cluster. And attitudes towards science. So perceptions of science, truth in science, objectivity, feelings towards particular practices, and etc. And you can read this. It's currently published in Royal Society of Open Science. And essentially the main takeaway is that there's some evidence for the good of open science, but we still need more evidence. However, the review makes a lot of constructive comments on how to help you integrate open scholarship into your department, into your educational institution. The next initiative that I'll talk about is called replications and reversals. And of course, we all know the replication in social sciences, because in the natural sciences, a lot replicates, everything kind of replicates perfectly. That's great. Social sciences, everything can change from a day to another. But there's also other issues, methodological issues for sure, but also different samples and etc. It's complex. In any case, for us, replication studies are at the core of our open science movement. And we thought that people in their research, but as well as in their teaching, were toolless. They didn't have a place to go where they're like, okay, where can I go for a collection of replications that have been made? So a lot in our studies, we teach in terms of effects, right? So we have famous studies, the Robbers Cave study, Milgram Stanford prison experiments and all of that. So what we did is to try to synthesize effects that could be put together. So I'll show you what that looks like. So for example, in social psychology, there is this idea of elderly priming, essentially that hearing about the old age makes people slower and or walk slower, but also hinders their cognitive abilities and whatnot. In any case, replications found the very opposite effect, that makes people walk faster, but also feel a little bit anxious and act on it. So we call this a reversal. Is when the effect size hypothesized original said that A and B are positively related, and replications consistently find the opposite effect. So this is a simple case, right? So essentially, we are gathering funds and applications, and please help us on this, to have 2 tools. So on top of cataloging things, as in on the website, we have 450 entries across 20 different fields. But we're gathering money and applying for grants to do 2 things. One is that folks can upload their syllabus and say, well, I don't want to it's not that I don't want, but people may want to know if something they are teaching has been replicated and what is the result of the replication. So you upload their syllabus and you receive, okay, based on the DOI, you receive feedback about what has been replicated and what's the current status that FORRT is curating. And the second thing is that, you're doing your research and you want to make sure that, you're citing replicable research. You upload your reference section and you can find out about the same. But also on this app here on the left, we are making our database open and making analyzable, meaning that people can conduct all sorts of meta-analytical questions and studies from that database and contribute to our understanding of replications moving forward. This is not funded yet, so if you know how, let us know. We're finding out. We're going to get there. We also wrote a paper of perspectives, which is another initiative, of course, that is about sort of reframing what for us was the replication crisis by highlighting the change that has been implemented since the replication crisis. So we argue that structural, community, and procedural change has since taken place. And we review what are these changes and how people can be, a little hopeful for the future. So this is a really good resource, especially if you are in social sciences where most of the discourse has been negative. This is a good resource for you to say, okay, the replication crisis has happened. There is a lot of problems with replications, types of replications. There's a gazillion different issues that we need to be attentive when it comes to our methods, generalizability of our findings, limitations, and a lot of things. But here are some tools and here are some initiatives. Here's some progress that we made towards that direction. And it also contextualized a lot of the replication crisis more into the process of accumulating science and the process of, just being better scientists, just the normal process of scientific production. Moving more to the social justice aspect of FORRT, and we founded this team called neurodiversity team. And for those who don't know, neurodiversity is the non-pathological variation in the human brain that affects things like socialization, learning, attention, mood, and a gazillion different mental functions, right? So we thought that neurodiversity had received far less attention than other aspects, and we thought that we needed to put the spotlight on first of all the unification, how the neurodiversity movement is close or has a lot in common with the open science movement, but also to empower underrepresented scholars, right? So they literally had no place to go in academia. And it was felt by a lot of neurodivergent researchers that they were, not appreciated and definitely stereotyped and prejudiced against. And so based on this, we wrote a position statement on how understanding neurodiversity is essential, is fundamental to not only understanding behavior and cognition, but also the scientific process of accumulating science, and how being kinder to one another, especially neurodiversity, can lead to improvements in the science we produce. And we argue that neurodivergent individuals are often stigmatized, devalued, and objectified. And we present perspectives from neurodivergent researchers on their experience, especially in academia. And essentially, we try to, show that implementation of that DEI has meaningful consequences for belongingness of neurodivergent scholars, right? And we talk about issues of disclosure, which is a really big thing in the movement, directions and prevalence, and intersection of neurodiversity and open science. So this is a picture that sort of subsumes what neurodiversity is, and remembering that neurotypicality is very much part of neurodiversity, right? And so are other things. We like very colorful figures because we believe it's a way to represent a lot of concepts together, and how social justice through universal design is related to open science, open scholarship. And in having conversations about this paper and sharing with one another our experiences and writing, which was a very long and long because it needed a very long process, we came out from this process thinking about that the people that contributed the most to the writing might had been, that there were factors that allowed them to contribute over other people. And we were having that discussion among ourselves and realized how much the privilege that we hold can affect our abilities to contribute, and how the current system in academia, the currency of academia, is authorship, and especially authorship also means how certain positions in the authorship order are more prestigious, right? The first author, the last author, the corresponding author. And of course, different sciences are completely different. There are entire sciences that only do alphabetical order, for example, where this no longer matters, or but the majority of sciences that we were aware of, this practices of what kind of prestige is related to a position in the authorship order, we realized that it would be good if we could have a deeper conversation about our privileges and how these privileges affect our abilities to contribute to a paper, a scientific paper, and just have a human conversation about our privileges. So this wheel of privilege is just for group of co-authors whenever they have doubts about authorship order that they may be informed by this wheel on how to prioritize, should they want to, people that have been historically disprivileged for positions of prestige over other people. And this graph has been on social media for quite some time now, and people are claiming to be the producers of this graph, and it has been retweeted like 20,000 times by different authors, and etc. So people are loving this, and thus we are preparing at FORRT an entire Shiny app, which allows people to both remove certain privileges as well as add certain privileges. Because let's say that you're just writing a paper with Finnish co-authors, right? You all are Finnish, you all have a lot of privilege, and you just want to separate between different things. Or if you're writing in Brazil or in India, and there are other issues in these countries, cultural, that might lead. So we're building a Shiny app and we're writing a specific paper. I now know I see that I'm late, so I'll go very fast now. We also have a collection of pedagogies. We're making other folks open their research materials so other people can replicate, and people can replicate their teaching materials, right? Not studies. Can just, find new pedagogies and didactics in teaching. We have a gazillion different syllabi on our website. So if you're like, oh, I want to learn how to teach research integrity, it's only syllabi, research materials, etc. We have over 2,000 resources on our curated list of resources. You can search the term per word here in the search bar. As long as it's a full word, you will find resources there. We're partnering up with the Center for Open Science, and we are holding on their resources as well. There's several social justice initiatives at FORRT We're talking with stakeholders, for example, people in the science institutions, editors of papers, etc., to essentially advance the conversation of how open science, the mandate of open science, also can sometimes affect different populations differently. Think of, for example, African Americans in the US, and how we can, as stakeholders, have systems in place so that doesn't happen and doesn't disprivilege this already this privileged population. This is just about how an idea gets to reality, but essentially somebody has an idea, they propose on team ideas, oh, I would like to do this, or it would be cool if we did that. And then we identify a team manager, we invite collaborators, we hold meetings, we produce the resource, always the educational and mentoring resource together with the paper. We write an academic paper, and that's how things gets done. And please visit our publications page to see. We have, I think it was a little bit more now, 120 citations. So people are citing us. For social sciences, a lot. I don't know how physics work, but this is, for us, it's nice. Maybe not a lot. That's it, folks. These are our social media, but we are also a little less frequent on Mastodon, on Instagram, and on LinkedIn. Thank you so much, and for this opportunity to present FORRT.
Hi, can you hear me? Sorry, I just got kicked out of Zoom and had to come back in, so I apologize. Flavio, that was great. Thank you so much for providing us that overview of FORRT. You have some incredible resources there, and I know you said a lot of them are the social sciences, but I think could be very valuable to our community as well. We can open up to question and answer now, and if anyone has a question, if you'd raise your hand, I can call on you, or you can open up your mic and ask Flavio some questions. Yeah, Rachel.
Hi, thank you so much for that presentation, Flavio. That was great. I've used the FORRT glossary before, and I'm a fan of that, but I didn't know about all of your other resources. So I really appreciate this overview, and I'm excited to dig more into all of the great work you've done. My question is about your work to advocate for restructuring incentives. So that's a topic that we hear about a lot. I'm with the NASA Science Mission Directorate, and it comes up a lot as something that we need to be doing to advance our work in open science, to make sure that folks are getting the credit that they deserve for doing this work, and especially as that relates to early career researchers. And I was excited to see that you had that as your restructuring incentives as part of your scientific utopia, because I really like that concept. But I'm just curious to hear sort of what is FORRT's approach for that advocacy around incentives and recognition, and any sort of insight or lessons learned from that work that you could share would be great.
All right. So first of all, thank you, Rachel. And I'll say, if at all possible, just because you're from NASA and we're a volunteer-based organization, and we're trying to sort of say, hey, we have impact, fund us because we're dying here, kind of situation. If you could join our Slack and say, hi, I'm from NASA, I'm using your resources, at least we have a track or something like that. There is impact or something. We're trying to collect impact. It's what I'm trying to say. All right, to answer your question, restructuring incentives, we're doing this in a few different ways. So essentially what we learned very early on is that mandates don't work. You tell people they must do certain things is not the right way. And it's fine if we're not going to convince maybe 20, 30, or 50% of the population. It's fine. Maybe they are doing amazing other different things. But the way that we need to approach people is just to say, hey, we have this umbrella, you're welcome here, and wait it out. So the way that grassroots, we think, can change the system of incentives is finding ways to make certain things work that didn't work before. So for example, when we said we want to be FORRT, we want to collect it, we use big team science to produce teaching resources that can be valuable to other people. Everybody said, are you insane? How are you going to transform? Like that? It didn't compute. We made it work. We also showed, for example, folks at the Center for Open Science how to build community. They had a different initiative, educational initiative, and we are very grassroots and very trying to respect we are very keen on our code of conduct. And essentially, we showed that it is possible to have a volunteer-based organization on open science and have a voice that, could be heard and could be useful to the conversations. So essentially, this is one of the ways. The other ways is to shed light on educators. So the Pedagogist project because I ran out of time, we essentially are showing, look, there's amazing, excellent educators. How do we give them the spotlight? We didn't want to use awards. The word awards generates bad incentives, so we call it pedagogies. And the upside is that we interview them, we give them the spotlight, but they also have to open all their material. So it's good for everybody. Everybody wins, right? The other thing that we were trying to do in changing the incentives is talking to stakeholders. So that initiative, we call it Equity in Open Science, is we have every 3 months, we have meetings with very powerful folks at our neck of the woods, and we try to discuss in a very open format. Often enough, it's folks with a lot of experience in the field, and we try to be very open about very basic questions, but also point out that mandates for open science can sometimes be detrimental to certain groups of society, because mandating it is not yeah. So those are the myriads of ways, and I try to pepper it with, as you said, some of the lessons learned along the way. But I'm sure that if you mention something about your initiative or attempts, I might be able to contribute to something else.
Thank you.
Great question, Rachel. Thank you for asking that. Any other questions? Flavio, you also have Lorraine, who is from Esri, posted in the chat that she would love to volunteer for FORRT. So she provided her email. So definitely, Lorraine, there you are if you want to comment.
Yes. Well, Cindy and I, we've been doing all kinds of things in open science for quite some time. And I work for a commercial company, which doesn't mean that you can't do open science. We devote a whole host of resources toward being open and transparent. And I would really love to connect. I was taking, I'm a scientist myself, so I'm just like, oh my goodness, I just drank from a fire hose. There's a lot of information. And I'm very excited. I'll be blocking some time in my calendar to go through a lot of the resources. And yes, I would like to volunteer. I don't know what that looks like, but I'm interested.
Thank you, Lorraine. To give you some insight, everything in FORRT is project-based in a way. We're formalizing and trying to become legal so that we can apply for grants. So visions can help. We're also reforming the clusters. So for example, we can't completely social science it. Does that make sense? Like make it less social science, but making it a little bit more natural sciences would help. Having resources and initiatives there. I think we have lots to learn from a lot of folks, including yourself, and we are very open towards that process. So that's one of the way of engaging with us. Other ways is, help us perhaps find funding or use our resources. We're on social media, so any kind words on social media kind of helps. We found out, like talking with Rachel again, when it comes to lessons learned, is that, you know, social media is a lot about making certain people feel comfortable. So sharing sometimes something about, you know, maybe you're just lurking at the community for a month or two, or attended a neurodiversity meeting or attended a replications meeting, you know, your lived experience. So we learned that, and a lot of folks who enter in FORRT, they are like, oh, I see that this is different, or, you know, whatever they experience. If we're good or bad, you know, if it's bad, we're going to try to do better. If it's good, you know, yay. Does that help the whole process?
Sure. Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks ever so much for that, Flavio. And Cindy, I have a quick question, if that's all right. And first, I wanted to say thanks to Rachel for the incentives question, because that has come up numerous times within our open science cluster, and so I appreciate that. And then my other question was, can you talk a little bit about some of the kind of barriers or challenges that you've seen for incorporating open science practices into higher education?
Can you ask the last? Can you say the last part again?
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about any challenges that you are seeing for incorporating open science into higher education?
Yeah, so I think universities in particular are very slow to change, and I found that. So first of all, you should know that I was a PhD. Well, I'm very junior, right? So I am an assistant professor for 4 months. So a lot of funds were not available to me, right? And I do not know how to write super grants. So speaking to Rachel's comment, any help, we just arrived there. Now, arriving at universities and knowing I'm there for 6 months, or 4 months, I already had interactions about the topic of integrating open science with the frame of, look, we just want to train better consumers of science, right? This is not about open science can be integrated into history, political science, psychology, and other things. It's just training better consumers of science. And people challenged me a lot. It's like, well, so I heard cynic things such as, oh, everybody's trying to pull the fish towards themselves. So this is an expression here. So essentially saying that I am defending a given topic, not to the interest of students, but because I am an expert on it, or like to benefit my teaching hours or something to that effect. So this does happen. Of course, there is also the very relevant aspect of training. So open science is relatively new, especially at my departments, such as the one I am in. You know, if you're in academia for 20 years, 30 years, which are the professors who hold most of the power, you know, come in this new topic, this young scholar saying X, Y, or Z. It can be challenging to make folks understand that we need to change the way in which we're training students. And for them to learn about this, I thought a priori that it would be far easier to get people to teach open science than to get them to implement that in their research. But I found out it's quite the opposite, because there's some changes in academia that incentivize open data, open code. You know, you get a badge, right, for these sort of things, or certain journals only accept if your data is completely open in code. So there's certain incentives for which open education in particular doesn't get. And when I talk about just, you know, integrating open science into your research, is is far easier because of the system of incentives than in your teaching and mentoring. And when I talk about open education, right? So mostly people are like, what? And there's similar to many topics in which are related to prejudice. A lot of folks say, I can't just open my teaching materials. That's the property of the university. There's some copyright issues that are misrecognized, and librarians ad infinitum try to say, well, actually, you would help other people. There's a gazillion different things that you can do. There's licenses, so a lot is getting the word out there of what you can do, what kind of rights you have when you share something, and what does that entail. So I hope that I try to speak of procedural research level changes, community changes, because those are very different. But please follow up with a question if I didn't completely answer your question. Good.
I have a follow-on question to that too, unless someone else does. I want to make sure we get everyone's questions in here. Flavio, first of all, can we share your PowerPoint? Do you care?
Open education.
I know, I thought so. Just wanted to make sure. I really like I'm one of those that likes the academic wheel of privilege graphic.
Yeah.
And of course, we see a lot of that in a lot of the work that we do in the natural sciences in the US here. And so my question is, I know FORRT is taking on trying to combat that a little bit, and how we take some of that privilege away, or give those who are not in that privileged circle access and expertise and resources and whatever. Do you have advice for us here in the United States where this is so prevalent? And especially in a lot of the work that we do here in our communities, in the science and the STEM world.
That is the most complicated thing. I think open science is easy compared to how complicated that is. I think that, there's a whole industry of D&I today, right? But when it comes to the D&I that we do, the social justice that we do, the recognition, the inviting people from the global South, like myself, but also people from different parts of the world with different backgrounds, and having a deeper understanding of their privilege, of how multifaceted one person can be, right? Is the goal. And in many ways, it's easy to implement in community building, but it does take the time, and you only know that it's working in indirect ways, kind of. So this is the kind of lesson that is really difficult. And if you're like, not you, but a lot of open science folks are very business oriented. So you have, from the way that they work, from the way that they hire, or the way that they community build. And maybe we need to change a little bit of our preconceptions, about this sort of stuff, because it takes a lot of time, and essentially that's it. It's very challenging, very challenging. You can imagine that Team Neurodiversity has folks with, for example, with a great deal of autistic tendencies. We have people with dissociative issues, we have ADHDers, we have dyslexic. So these people are not naturally in the same environment, right? And we make it work because we feel respected. So people who like fidgeted, people who are using a different kind of communication style is respected. So
it is 7:00 p.m.
Sorry for that. Oh, and I'm talking too much already. But essentially, the code of conduct is a very good tool to signalize to folks what are the questions that you have and that you've been paying attention. And I think a dynamic code of conduct is very important, and feel free to use FORRTs if that's at all helpful. And implementing that, and especially bringing in people has been our approach.
No, that's great. I knew that's a complex and there's not a one-off answer, but with that, I know we're at time and I know it's late for you. So we really appreciate you being here, Flavio, and for that wonderful presentation and all these plethora of resources that we now have to explore with this group. Jenny or Morgan, anything you all want to end on?
Not from me, Cindy. I was just writing. Thanks very much, Flavio, in the chat. Excellent presentation. And we will see you next month. I think it's the 25th of July for our next webinar in the series. And thanks all for participating.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you for inviting me. Have a great day.
Thank you. You too, Flavio. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye. Ciao.
Bye. Take care.